Mr. Speaker, straightforwardly, I was proud to support Brexit. It was the right thing for this country. Just remember one thing, Mr. Speaker, we had the fastest vaccine rollout in the world. We had that because of our freedoms after leaving the European Union.
It's just complete bollocks, and the Prime Minister knows it. And it comes just weeks after he told the public this.
So one of my first jobs is to try and restore trust in government. And that starts with being honest with people.
Under European law, the UK was permitted to act independently to approve the vaccine in an emergency. Britain was still bound by EMA rules when the COVID vaccination programme began. Don't just take my word for it. Listen to the head of the MHRA, June Rain.
We appear to be getting authorisation for this vaccine ahead of our friends in Europe. I was just wondering, does the fact that the UK is no longer part of the EU, did that make any difference to the speed with which you were able to complete your authorisation?
We have been able to authorise the supply of this vaccine using provisions under European law which exist until the 1st of January.
EU legislation enacted into British law already allowed countries to temporarily authorise vaccines without waiting for approval from the EMA. In fact, the UK government always made it clear that it could authorise vaccines unilaterally under European law before we left the EU. The Prime Minister now using a cause of international cooperation and celebration to continue to sow division in this way is an absolute disgrace.
We're also seizing the economic opportunities, deregulating and signing trade deals around the world.
Well, let's listen to former Environment Secretary George Eustice addressing the House of Commons on the trade deal with Australia on November 14th.
I was in the Cabinet in 2021, and I was in this Cabinet subcommittee that argued over the Australian trade deal. For yes, there were deep arguments and differences over how we should approach this. But since I now enjoy the freedom of the backbenches, I no longer have to put such a positive gloss on what was agreed. The first step is to recognise that the Australia trade deal is not actually a very good deal for the UK. The truth of the matter is that the UK gave away far too much for far too little in return.
And then there's the trade deal with New Zealand.
British farmers have reacted with shock to the terms of a new free trade deal with New Zealand.
The deal will see Kiwi meat imported without tariffs, and farmers in the UK say they get nothing in return.
It's us surrendering to you, New Zealanders, and giving you a great deal, and we're getting nothing out of it.
Actually taking advantage of our freedoms is going to drive growth and jobs and prosperity in the United Kingdom.
Seriously?
We see the UK pretty close to the bottom of the league table in terms of the forecast for economic growth, particularly in 2023. So the UK essentially sees no growth at all, and the only country that was worse than the UK was sanctioned Russia.
It gets worse. In fact, 6 years on from the UK's decision to leave the European Union, Brexit is still proving the biggest headache for British businesses, ranking even higher than Russia's war in Ukraine, COVID or rising energy costs. According to an Evaluate survey conducted by Coleman Parks in August, 4 in 5 UK businesses felt that Brexit had proved the biggest supply chain disruptor over the past 12 months. An even higher proportion, 83%, think the worst is yet to come.
But Mr. Speaker, it's the same old Labour ideas, more debt, more inflation.
Well, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he finds out just weeks ago the Conservative government managed to crash the economy with its plans for unfunded tax cuts for the rich and blew a £30 billion black hole in the country's finances. And he'll fall off his chair when he finds out his party has managed to deliver the highest inflation in 40 years, the highest taxation since the Second World War, the biggest drop in living standards since records began, and UK trade performance at its worst level on record.
That's how we'll drive growth and prosperity.